Welcome to the Public Housing Repositioning Post-Closing How-To video series. The goal of this video series is to help explain and discuss common issues that occur post-closing after repositioning public housing assets to voucher assistance. Each video provides quick guidance to public housing agencies, PHAs, that are new to or unfamiliar with Rental Assistance Demonstration, RAD, and/or Project-Based Voucher, PBV, program requirements. The videos will help PHAs better understand their asset management and reporting responsibilities post-repositioning. The videos provide information to PHAs that have converted their assistance from public housing to voucher assistance as part of repositioning. The goal of this video is to explain how a PHA gets approval of an independent entity. Some videos in this series highlight program features that are applicable to both RAD PBVs and non-RAD PBVs. This video describes a process applicable to both, as well as regular HCVs. This video covers 5 major topics including: what is an IE? When is an IE needed? What functions can an IE perform? How is an IE approved? Things to consider when selecting an IE. First, we will start with 6 basic questions. What is an IE? An independent entity, or IE for short, is an independent, HUD-approved public or private organization or person whose services a PHA retains to perform certain voucher-related functions. What functions can an IE perform? There are 7 different functions that an IE can perform. We will go into detail later in the video. When does a PHA need to obtain the services of an IE? An IE is needed for all PHA-owned voucher units, including where tenant-based voucher holders reside, project-based vouchers, and RAD project-based vouchers. What does PHA-owned mean? After April 18, 2017, a unit is considered PHA-owned if it is owned by the PHA, which includes a PHA having a controlling interest in the entity that owns the unit, owned by an entity wholly controlled by the PHA, or owned by a limited liability company, LLC, or a limited partnership in which the PHA or an entity wholly controlled by the PHA holds a controlling interest in the managing member or general partner. Who is responsible for selecting an IE? The PHA is responsible for selecting the IE. Who is responsible for approving the IE? The local HUD field office of public housing will approve IEs unless the unit of general local government is performing the services. A PHA must obtain the services of an IE for any PHA-owned unit that has or is proposed to have a voucher attached to it. This includes project-based vouchers, housing choice vouchers, home ownership vouchers. What functions can an IE perform? There are 7 different tasks that an IE may perform for your PHA. 5 functions are required for IEs for RAD PBV units. These include establish PBV contract rents, initial rent to owner, and redetermined rent to owner. Determine rent reasonableness. Provide a copy of the rent reasonableness determination to the PHA and the HUD office where the project is located. Inspect units. Provide a copy of the inspection report to the PHA and HUD field office where the project is located. There are 2 additional functions for non-RAD units. These include review the PHA's PBV selection process. Establish term of initial and any renewal HAP contract as required in 24 CFR Section 983.205. How is an IE approved? When selecting an IE, it is important to remember the entity must fulfill 3 basic criteria. They are: the IE and PHA must be autonomous. The parties must not be connected legally, financially, except with regard to compensation for services performed for PHA-owned units, or in any other manner that could cause either party to be improperly influenced by the other. For example, the IE must not include individuals who have a relationship with the PHA or the project that would interfere with the IE's judgment in carrying out responsibilities as related to the PHA-owned units. The IE must have the ability to perform its responsibilities in an unbiased manner. The PHA must not take any action that could prevent the IE from making unbiased determinations related to its responsibilities. An independent entity could be any of the following types of organizations: another PHA, PHA vendors, real estate agencies, non-profit social services agencies with affordable housing experience, law firms specializing in affordable housing law. Depending on what type of IE your PHA selects, there are two paths for approval. First, if you choose next level of local general government, you do not need approval from HUD. Second, if you choose another type of entity, like another PHA or an independent company, the HUD Field Office of Public Housing is responsible for approving the IE. If you choose an entity that requires HUD approval, the process is simple and requires one document. The PHA must submit a joint PHA and independent entity certification. The next step after choosing an IE is for HUD to review and approve. The process is simple and requires one document. The PHA must submit a joint PHA and independent entity certification. The certification document needs to include these three basic pieces of information. The document needs to certify that the PHA and the proposed entity have no legal, financial, or any other connection that could cause either party to be improperly influenced by the other, and that the proposed independent entity will perform its responsibilities as it relates to the PHA-owned units in an unbiased manner. The certification must be dated and signed by the executive director or equivalent position of the PHA and the independent entity. The certification must clearly state the name, address, and point of contact for both the PHA and the proposed independent entity. There will be an additional item required if the PHA is using multiple IEs, which will be discussed later when we cover using multiple IEs. HUD retains discretion to request additional documentation or use information already available to HUD in determining whether to approve. It is important to identify what functions the specific IE will perform when you seek HUD approval. There are 7 different tasks that an IE may perform for your PHA. 5 functions are required for IEs for RAD PBV units. These include: establish PBV contract rents, initial rent to owner, and redetermined rent to owner. Determine rent reasonableness. Provide a copy of the rent reasonableness determination to the PHA and the HUD field office where the project is located. Inspect units. Provide a copy of the inspection report to the PHA and HUD field office where the project is located. There are 2 additional functions for non-RAD PBV units. These include: review the PHA's PBV selection process. Establish term of initial and any renewal HAP contract as required in 24 CFR 983.205. Please note, the field office can also perform the review of the selection process. It does not have to be done only by an IE. Also, HUD may revise the list of functions, so it is important to stay up to date on the required list. If your PHA plans to use different independent entities to perform different functions, or different independent entities at different projects, the PHA must submit for approval each independent entity it plans to use and identify the function the entity will perform. PHAs are not required to submit requests for all independent entities at the same time. For example, your PHA may select one IE to perform all IE functions, or may get approval for different IEs for different functions or projects. If there is only one IE that will cover all the functions, then the PHA just needs to submit a general certification. If the PHA is using multiple IEs for various aspects of the projects or functions, the PHA must list the functions in the certification. So now that you have the information compiled in the certification, when does it need to be submitted? The PHA must submit the certification and receive HUD approval before the entity performs any functions. Please note that in RAD transactions, all the projects begin as PHA owned. Therefore, PHAs should be mindful of this timeline for RAD deals. When thinking about timing, PHAs should consider the following factors. What functions are required to be performed by the independent entity? Will the PHA use more than one independent entity for different functions? How do these elements interplay with the expected action? For example, PBV proposal selection or RAD PBV HAP contract execution. In general, when a PHA is selecting an IE, it is important to consider the following questions. What is the scope of services you need an IE to provide? Do you have a previously approved IE? Do you want to use different IEs for different functions? Once an independent entity has been approved by HUD, the PHA may use that same independent entity for other PHA-owned units or for other functions. There are a few things to keep in mind if you are going this direction. If your PHA will use an IE to perform a function other than the function for which it was previously approved, then the PHA must certify in writing to HUD that it will use a previously HUD-approved independent entity to perform a new function, which must be identified in the certification. The entity must be qualified to perform the new function. For example, a law firm that was previously approved to review a PBV selection review process may not be an appropriate independent entity for the purpose of conducting inspections. To make this request to HUD, your PHA is essentially submitting an update letter, which HUD may or may not approve, to add one or more specified functions to the IE's already approved list of functions. Often, PHAs may add functions multiple times, so to help keep track, it is suggested that you provide a copy of the latest approval or other records clarifying what the IE already has been approved to do. If you need more information to inform your decision, see Notice PIH 2017-21, Attachment A and B for more information about the requirements. And please contact your field office of public housing with specific questions.